Hey guys, welcome back to our VCP 6.5-Exam hands-on training. This is the lab 4 in our series. In this lab, we'll go ahead and start working with the VMware's vCenter server. We'll go ahead and deploy a new vCenter server, and then we will go ahead and start exploring some of the features of the vCenter in much more detail. This is the typical content or the objective for this lab. We'll go ahead and deploy our first VCSA, which is VMware's vCenter server appliance. Instead of installing it on Windows, we will be making use of the VCSA. And then once the deployment is done, we'll go ahead and configure our VCSA appliance. And then we will work with our previously installed ESXi host that we have done in our previous episode. We'll go ahead and add those ESXi hosts to the vCenter so we can start managing those ESXi hosts from our vCenter server. We'll also go ahead and explore the NTP configuration. We'll also take a look at backing up the VCSA and some of. So let's jump onto our hands-on. So I went ahead and downloaded the VCSA installer, and I have extracted the VCSA installer onto my system. So within the VCSA installer, there are a couple of directories, and one of the directories says a VCSA UI installer. So simply go ahead and double click on this directory. There are 3 subdirectories within this one. There is a Lin64, Mac, and Windows 32. So we are working with Windows. So I'll go ahead and select Windows 32 over. Now within this directory, we have a file by name installer. So simply go ahead and double click on this file, and let's go ahead and run our installer. So on the installer page, there are a couple of options that are being presented and we can work with. There is an option that says install, which clearly indicates, okay, hey, install a new vCenter server appliance, or PSE, which is Platform Services Controller appliance. Let me go ahead and rearrange it a little better so you guys can see. The second option on our installer says upgrade. Upgrade existing, let's say you have an old version of VCSA, probably 6.0, and you plan to upgrade that from 6.0 to the 6.5. You can go ahead and make use of the upgrade option. There is a migrate option, which clearly says migrate from existing vCenter for Windows to VCSA. If you have your vCenter running on your Windows and you want to convert that to the VCSA, this would be the option. Last but not the least is the restore. We will go ahead and learn how do you back up the VCSA in an event anything happens to your vCenter. You want to redeploy the vCenter. You can go ahead and make use of the backup that we have done of the VCSA and deploy your VCSA using your backup. Let me go ahead and this is our ESXi that we had installed earlier, and on that ESXi you can see there is only one VM. We have not deployed anything else. So now let's go. We will be using this ESXi for the deployment of our VCSA. You can go ahead and double click on installer, and that would launch our VCSA appliance installer. There are a couple of options on this installer UI. There is install, there is an upgrade, there is a migrate, restore. The option that we are interested right now is the install, which clearly says install a new VCSA or PSE. Upgrade would be if you are upgrading from an older version to this version of VCSA. Migrate is something if you have a vCenter running for Windows and you want to convert from Windows to the VCSA, you would go ahead and select the option being migrate. And the last but not the least is a restore. You can go ahead and back up your VCSA in the event anything happens to your vCenter. If you want to redeploy your VCSA, you can go ahead and make use of that backup by using the restore option. But the thing we are interested is the install. So simply go ahead and click on install here. The first stage in the install, it's the deploy appliance. So there are a couple of stages that we'll go through in this whole process. So simply go ahead and click next here. The first thing we are being presented is the license agreement. Read it thoroughly. Everything looks good. Simply go ahead and accept the license and go ahead and click on next option. On this page of the select deployment type, there are 2 types of deployment that are being presented to us. One clearly says, yeah, there is an appliance which has both the platform services controller as well as vServer, everything within the one box, and that's why it's called embedded platform service control. There is another installation that we can do where we have an appliance where we have a PSC running independently and vCenter running independently. This would be a choice if you're deploying for a pretty large environment, but for this lab and for this demo and for our exam point of view, we are good with the embedded option. Now simply go ahead and hit next on the screen. Now we are being presented the deployment target. So here the deployment target is the host where you plan to deploy your ESXi, and on this side of the screen you can see we will be making use of our ESXi that we have installed earlier. So now go ahead and specify the details of the ESXi host. Specify the username for your ESXi host and the password for your ESXi host so the installer can connect to this ESXi host and start deploying the VCSA appliance on that ESXi host. Once everything looks good, just simply go ahead and click next. If everything is good, you will be presented with a certificate warning and the ESXi thumbprints of the certificate, read it. If everything looks good, just simply go ahead and hit yes here, and now it's validating. Now in this step, it says set up appliance name. Now we are ready to configure our VCSA appliance. The first thing is being asked is our VCSA name that you like. So I'll go ahead and say VCSA-65. Go ahead and configure a root password. When you are configuring the root password, pay attention to this I icon, which has certain requirement for the password. It needs to be at least 8 characters, no more than 20 characters. It's expecting at least one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, and one special. So based on these combination, I went ahead and specified our root password. If everything looks good, now go ahead and hit next here. Now the next thing that we are being presented, it clearly says the select deployment size. So the select deployment size, pay attention to the number of hosts that you plan to manage. If you're working in a production, look at the number of VMs that you plan to manage in the environment, and depending accordingly, you scale or you size your deployment. Because for this lab and this for demo and the server they are working with have plenty of resources. So I will go ahead and select a large deployment here. Again, if you don't have resources, you can just simply work with the tiny just to speed up some of the things. For our demo, I'll go ahead and select large as the deployment size. And again, do pay attention to some of the deployment size according to your need. Once you're done with the deployment size, go ahead and hit next here. Now at this time, we are being presented with the data store 1. The installer was able to successfully connect to this ESXi, and it was able to fetch the data stores available on that ESXi, and it sees there is one data store that has a capacity of 1.8 terabyte, and right now 1.3 terabyte is free on that data store. So you can go ahead and select the data store where you plan to deploy your VCSA, and if you want to save some of the disk, you can definitely enable the thin disk mode. So I will go ahead and select the thin disk mode. If you need more help, you can always click on the I icon, get some of the information. It clearly says a thin provision disk does not pre-allocate all of the space, so it was not going to go ahead and reserve all the space, so that's okay. We'll go ahead and select thin. Now simply go ahead and click next on this page. Now we are being presented with the configuring the network setting for our VCSA. So go ahead and specify a system name. Before we specify system name, let's look at what the I says. vCenter uses FQDN or IP address as the system name. So if you recall in this episode, I have not been making use of the DNS. So that means the IP address will be used as the system name. So if we leave it, the system will use IP addresses as a host name or system name or FQDN. Again, this is an optional field, so you can just leave it empty, or if you want, you can go ahead and specify an IP address. I will show you something later. In this case, I'm going to leave the system name as empty. I'll go ahead and specify the IP address that I want to be assigned to our vCenter. Go ahead and configure the subnet mask, configure the gateway, configure the DNS server. You can see by default the HTTP and HTTP ports are configured for you. If everything looks good on this page, simply go ahead and hit next. But before I hit next, you can see we have not specified the system name. As I said, this is something optional. If we don't specify, the system will automatically pick IP address as the system name. So when you go ahead and hit on next, and you can see automatically the system name is being now picked up as the IP address that was assigned to the VCSA. These are some of the details. Okay, this is the target host where we plan to deploy our VCSA. This is the name of the VCSA. The deployment type is an embedded one. The size is a large, and these are some of the IP address details. Now once everything looks good on this page, if at this stage if you want to make a change, you can definitely go back and make any change. But once you click on finish, there's no way to make any of the change. If you need to make any change, let's say with the deployment size or type, you would have to read it. If everything looks good, just simply go ahead and click on finish here. Now at this stage, the system is initializing, and if I go back quickly to our ESXi, it says import VApp, and it's starting to import. If I go ahead and refresh this one, you can see it went ahead and created a VM by name VCSA65, and it has started doing the import work, and right now it says running being 1%. Let me not sure if you can see that. Yeah, so it says running 4% right now. So this whole process is going to take close to 10-15 minutes, and after 10-15 minutes we will continue with the next stage. I will meanwhile show you if there is any change with the deployment. So after 10 minutes, the stage 1 deployment just got completed successfully. It says the platform service controller deployment complete, and it's 100%. And on the same screen, it kind of indicates to proceed with stage 2 of the deployment, click continue. And at this stage, if you want to access to the VCSA management interface, you can go to the IP address that we specified during the install on the port 5480. But before we go ahead and do that, let's see if we can reach this IP address or not. Let's go ahead and try to ping this IP address. And as you can see, we are able to reach that IP address. That means the VCSA deployment went through successfully and we are able to ping. Just go back to your ESXi also and we can see the VCSA 6.5 is being deployed and it's powered on with some of the specs that we have specified, like number of CPU, the amount of memory and other details. Let's come back to our installer and we'll continue with the stage 2 of our deployment. So simply go ahead and you can copy this URL just for the reference, but go ahead and simply click continue here. Once that's done, this is the stage 2. The stage 2 kind of indicates set up vCenter appliance with an embedded PSE. If you recall, during the first stage we had selected an embedded deployment. That means the vCenter and the PSE were together on a single box or single instance. Now let's go ahead and click next here. Now it's going to go ahead and configure some of the details here. The time synchronization mode, synchronize time with the NTP server. So on this box we can go ahead and specify an IP address. Let me go ahead and do that. Once everything looks good, we can just simply go ahead and click next here. But on the same page, if you see, we are being presented with an SSH being as the option. That means, and the default option for the SSH, if you take a look, it says as disabled. So if you want to enable an SSH to your vCenter, you can go ahead and enable that. I will be doing that to enable. So let me go ahead and change that being enabled. And when everything looks okay, just simply go ahead and hit next on this page. Now we are being presented with the SSO configuration. So SSO is nothing but your single sign-on configuration. On the single sign-on, you can go ahead and specify your domain name, specify a username. In this case, the username is being administrator. You need to go ahead and specify your single sign-on password, confirm the password, and a site name if you like. Or if you have an existing install and you want to join into that one, you can go ahead and do that. In my case, we are deploying a new one, so we will go ahead and specify a single sign-on domain name. So I will go ahead and select as the domain name being vSphere.local. Go ahead and enter your password that for the single sign-on. And again, for single sign-on, if you take a look, there are certain things we need to pay attention. Okay, uppercase, lowercase, and number, some of that kind of combination. So let me go ahead and specify that would fulfill all of these requirements. And on this page, go ahead and specify a site name. If you go ahead and click on I, just you can get a more detail. The site name must conform to some of these details. So we can go ahead and specify a site name. Let's call it our site number 1 or site A. Once everything looks good on this page, just simply go ahead and hit next onto this page. You are being presented to join VMware Customer Enhancement Improvement Program. If there's something you're interested with, you can definitely go ahead and select that. For this lab, for this demo, we will be not doing that. So I will just go ahead and simply uncheck this box and go ahead and click on the next. On this page, we are being presented with some of the things that we had configured. If everything looks good, just simply go ahead and hit finish over here. And we are being presented with a message which says you will not be able to pause or stop the install from completing once it started. Click OK to continue or cancel to stop the install. If you're good with all of these things, you can go ahead and click OK. Once we go ahead and hit OK, this process could take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. So let me go ahead and hit OK and we'll continue after the once this stage gets over. So it took us some time. Our install finally got completed. Now we'll go ahead and simply click on the close button. Once the install is over, now let's go ahead and log into our newly installed VCSA's management interface. For that, you can go to the IP address of your VCSA followed by port number 5480, and you are being prompted for the username and password. So the username for your VCSA is root, and password is something that you specified during the setup or install of your VCSA. Once everything looks good, go ahead and enter the username and password, and you are logged onto your VCSA management, where it shows you the overall health of your VCSA, the version that you are running, the product that you have installed, and you can say the type is server with embedded. The single sign-on domain, if you recall, that's what we had configured, vSphere.local, and right now the status seems to be running and there are no problems. There are a couple of options on the left hand side that you can work with. You can take a look at the networking, you can go to the time, and you can take a look at some of the things that you configure, like the NTP server. If you need to change the NTP server, you can go ahead and add it and specify a different NTP server. You can go ahead and change your time zone if you like. So let me go ahead and change my time zone. Same way, if you have to make any other change, you can go to administration and change your password if you desire. And there are a few things. So if I go back to the summary page, on top of the summary page, there are a couple of options. There is like create support bundle. If you're working with the VMware support for any reason, and if there is a problem, you can go ahead and create support bundle here. You can go ahead and reboot your VCSA from here. If you need to shut down, you can go ahead and do that. And at the same time, there is an option that says backup. If you recall, on the installer, we had a fourth option that says restore. Before you can restore, you need to take a backup. So if you want to take a backup of your VCSA freshly or after you have done some configuration, you can come to the management page, and from there we can go ahead and click on the backup. On the backup, there are different protocols that we can work with. There is an HTTPS, HTTP, SCP, and a few other options. So let's say we want to use the do the backup using the SCP being the protocol. So let's go ahead and select the SCP. Specify the location of your server where we want to backup, and it kind of indicates server address followed by the path. So let me go ahead and type in my server path where we want to do the backup. Once everything looks good in terms of the folder, go ahead and type the username that can authenticate against that server. And now if you want to encrypt your backup, you can go ahead and select encrypt backup data, and you can specify an extra layer of password here. Now we'll go ahead and click on next. When we click on next, the backup application is going to validate all of the information that we entered. So if you can see, it says validating input. So that means I was able to successfully connect to the server. Now it's fetching some of the other details. When you are ready, you can just simply go ahead and click next, and it talks about the current size of your VCSA in terms of inventory and configuration, historical data, and all. When everything looks good, just simply go ahead and click next. And when you're ready to do the backup, just simply go ahead and click finish. So that's how you can back up your VCSA, and later on, if you need to restore, you can go ahead and restore your VCSA using the same backup. Now let's go ahead and log out from our management page, and we will log into our newly installed vSphere client. So go ahead and type the IP address of your VCSA into the browser. You are being prompted to enter the username and the password for your system. So let's go ahead and type the password and the username. So if you recall, our username was administrator at vSphere.local, and the password that we had specified during the install. Using the username and password combination, we should be able to log into the VCSA or the vCenter web console or web client. And from there, we'll go ahead and explore some of the options which are available on your vSphere web client. So once we log in onto the vSphere web client, you can see clearly the vCenter will expired our license. It's kind of using an expired license or a temporary license. And you can take a look at this is the IP address of your VCSA, and right now there is nothing on this VCSA, so you're being prompted to probably create a data center and some of the other things. If you want to assign the license to your server, you can always go to the home. Under the home, there are a couple of options. If you go ahead and click under administration, within the administration on the left hand side, we have a couple of options that says licensing. You can go ahead and provide a license key and go ahead and assign that license key to your vSphere or the vCenter in this case. Within the same page, there are a couple of options. So under the single sign-on, we have this tab that says configuration. Under the configuration, there are a couple of things that you can go ahead and do. So under the policies tab and password policy, if I go ahead and click edit here, within the policy, we can go ahead and configure or change. Password change must occur every 90 days. If you don't want this to be done, what we can go ahead and do, we change this value to 0. That means the password will never expire. And some of these things you can go ahead and always make change if you desire so. If you recall, I like to do one more thing also when I'm working with my vSphere or within the lab. If you recall, when we logged onto the vSphere client, we had to specify administrator at vSphere.local. And if you recall, vSphere.local was our single sign-on domain name. This is the only default domain name on the system. So I don't want to be typing every time vSphere.local while logging into my vCenter. We can go to identity source. Under the identity source, we have two identity sources as of right now. There is a vSphere.local and there is a local OS, which is set by default. So go ahead and select the vSphere.local and make this as your default domains. By doing so, you can avoid typing vSphere.local every time when you are trying to log into your vSphere web client. So that's something I highly encourage, or when you're working in the lab, it makes perfect sense to go ahead and do that basically. Now let's go back to the home again, and from the home we'll go to the home screen. On the home screen there are a couple of options. There is a host and cluster, VM and templates. So now let's go ahead and click on host and cluster, because we will go ahead and add our previously installed ESXi host to our newly installed this vCenter. Now let's go back to your home, and from the home let's go ahead and click on host and cluster. Within the host and cluster there are a couple things that we can go ahead and do that. First thing, we'll go ahead and add our previously installed ESXi, and if you take a look at this wizard, the step one says you need to create a data center. Second thing, add a host probably. The third step is add virtual machine, and then the setup is the wizard is complete. So let's go ahead and create a data center first. So click on the data center and specify your data center name. I'll go ahead and call it my data center as DC1, and just simply go ahead and click OK. And so once that's done, on the left hand side you can see we have a data center DC1 being added. Within this DC1, the second option, it says add a host. So if you want to add a host, now let's go ahead and click on add a host, or you can simply right click. And again, there are ways you can, most of the time you can right click and you will have a lot of the similar options. If you want to create a cluster, you can go ahead and create a cluster, but we will go ahead and add our first host that we had installed earlier. So just simply go ahead and click on add host. When you add a host, you are being prompted to specify the host name or the IP address of your ESXi that was installed earlier. So now let's go ahead and type in the IP address of your ESXi host, and the type is ESXi, the location is data center 1. So now let's simply go ahead and click next. Here we are being prompted to enter the credentials to connect to our ESXi host. So go ahead and specify root as the username and the password of your ESXi host that was configured during the install. And let's go ahead and click next. If everything is okay, you are being prompted for the certificate security alert. Now read it through. If everything looks good, just simply go ahead and click yes here. We are validating, and our vCenter is successfully able to connect to our ESXi host. We are being presented some of the information of our ESXi host, the IP address, the vendor, the model of our UCS server, and the version that is being run, as well as the number of virtual machines running on our ESXi host. And this definitely matches with the ESXi host that we had installed earlier. Now just simply go ahead and click next on this page. You're being prompted to assign a license for this ESXi host. If you have a license, go ahead and simply select the license and go to the click next. Now in the lockdown mode, there are three options. There is a disable, there is a normal, and there is a strict. In the normal mode, as it indicates, the host is accessible only through the local console vCenter server. That means if anything happens, you will be able to access your host through the console. In the strict down mode, the host is accessible only through vCenter. That means even direct console is not available. And if you leave it disabled, that means we can access our ESXi host using the console or through the vCenter. So I will leave the lockdown mode to be being disabled. Go ahead and simply click next. And the VM location, in this case, the VM location is our data center 1. So go ahead and click on DC1. Simply go to the next. And you are being shown as the similar details. Once everything looks good, just simply go ahead and click on finish. If everything goes well, and right now we can see our ESXi host is being added, and right now the operation is 90% and it's completed. And on the left hand side, you can see the host is right now added 43. This is our ESXi host, and these are the list of the VMs which are being run on that ESXi host. Now if you need to see some of the details of the ESXi host, you can again go to the summary page. I'll go ahead and give you the details about that particular ESXi host in terms of the CPU, memory. It says okay, the SSH is also enabled on this host, and some of the other details. And using the similar approach, we will go ahead and add our rest of the ESXi host to this data center. So now let's go ahead and see how we can configure NTP clients on our newly installed or newly added ESXi host. So to configure the NTP on your host, now go to your host, and once you're on your host, there are a couple of options, and one of the options being here, it says configure. Once you are on the configure option, within the configure option, we have something called, now let's go ahead and scroll down on these options. And one of the option says time configuration. When you click on the time configuration, right now it shows your date and time, the NTP client is being disabled, server status is also stopped right now, NTP server. So we can go ahead and configure the NTP server. So now let's go ahead and click on edit. And within the NTP server, we can go ahead and specify, okay, hey, we want to use the NTP server and start and stop this NTP server when the host starts and stop. And let's go ahead and specify the IP address of the NTP server that we want to use. So in this case, let's type the IP address of our NTP server. Once that is done, we will go ahead and simply click OK here. And you can see the NTP server was configured, but the NTP server is not started, but right now the client is enabled. So if I go back and click on edit, there is an option that says start, there is an option that says stop and restart. So simply go ahead and click on start, and that should start your NTP on the ESXi host. Right now you can see our ESXi host is syncing with this NTP server, and that's the procedure to configure the NTP on our ESXi host. And you would just repeat the same procedure for rest of your ESXi host. So hopefully you got a good idea in terms of how do you really go ahead and install or deploy your first VCSA, then how do you configure your data center, and then adding the host, configuring the NTP on your ESXi host, doing your backup of your VCSA. That'll be all for this episode. I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.